Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, his church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison.
My name is Brandon Bonner.
And we'll be your host.
I'm not used to that.
It's going to take me a while to get used to the roar. Okay, so welcome back. If for those of you listening for the first time, we're going to jump into a couple episodes over the next 2 weeks of some kind of sensitive topics. We're going to talk about some sexuality stuff, gender and transgender and that kind of stuff. So it's a sensitive topic, and I think it would be probably helpful if you've never listened to this podcast before you listen to this one, or even if you have listened, go back and take a listen to episode 6, because we kind of set up these next few podcasts by talking about people, and we kind of emphasize this idea that what we want to address is not necessarily positions, and we really were talking about the idea that we have been made in God's image, Imago Dei, if you recall, Brandon, and what that actually means, because it sets the framework for a good, healthy Christian dialogue that I think if you, over the next 2 episodes, as you listen into this, you're going to see that the approach that Brandon and I are taking may not be a position that you're used to hearing. And I want to do this as a model or even kind of a mentoring thing in my experience dealing with these issues in the counseling perspective, because I think there's room here. There's a place to do this the right way, and there's definitely, unfortunately, what we see Christians dealing with this issue in a way that's not healthy and not beneficial, and ultimately it's not a biblical way to deal with the issue, because we're in this area where we're dealing with ideologies rather than personhood, and that personhood is rooted in the image of, we're made in the image of God. And so always, as we go through this, we're going to be trying our best to speak the truth in love, which is grounded in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. And so the goal here is that every discussion that we have is to protect our human dignity first. That's important. And That's the approach we need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we think about what's going on right now, right? So there's some culture things going on, and we've talked about this in previous episodes and hinted on it, of identity is now something that's personally constructed.
Yep.
It's discovered internally, but we know that Scripture doesn't teach that.
Right.
Scripture teaches us that God has created us in His own image, and we should be encouraged by the fact that we have comfort, and we're created in the image of an all-powerful, all-knowing Creator of the universe. Right. And so when we think about culture, things like gender or really any labels we can put on ourselves, they've become a central marker rather than just one aspect of someone's personhood. And so I think that it's important for us to really reflect on what kind of labels are we putting on ourselves, both as human beings and as us as followers of Christ. Some scripture here, Judges 21:25. In those days there was no kings; everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world. And so when you start putting labels or markers on yourself, ourselves, then we're removing God from that equation and His design, and our own self, our own pride becomes the highest authority.
Why do you think that we are so apt to want to put labels on things?
Well, I think it comes down to a sense of belonging and community. And so we all want to be a part of something, right? So labels can help us identify with other people, to relate to them, to build relationships and have community and a sense of belonging. And so, I mean, I think that's definitely a piece of why people do it.
I think too, it also, as I'm listening, labels can also separate different ones. It's like us against you. Well, we're part of this group, you're part of that group. And so while some labels I think are good to identify, we want to identify as Christians. We want people to identify us as Christians. But that's where the rubber meets the road, because a lot of times what we want people, if we want people to identify us as Christians, but we're castigating, we're pointing fingers and calling people or groups of people something, sticking another label on them that's negative, that doesn't present our case really well if people understand what Christianity is supposed to be. And so I think the labels today that we're throwing out there are probably doing more harm than good.
Yep. Yeah, and we've, as a society, have really placed a lot of value on those labels.
Yep.
And I think it's maybe part of the reason you see such a divide in our culture. You have, it seems like, and maybe this isn't true, but it seems like that divide keeps getting wider and wider when you think about, social issues or political ideas. And it's these labels. It's easier to label another side or be, mean or derogatory, or it's easy to label yourself and be associated with something and a sense of pride with that label. And I think that it's our mission. It's a mission of ours as Christians to help people understand and identify with the one true label that they should be identified with, and in sharing that God has given you the only label that you need.
Yeah. I want to dig down a little bit deeper on this too, because we're living in a very unique time where social media is such a pervasive thing. Honestly, I don't know anybody right now that does not have social media. It's funny, even my parents who are in their 80s, it's almost like one of those things is like handle with care. And so, anybody above the age of 50 is probably on Facebook, and it's captivated them. It's taken over. It's like they believe everything that they see out there, and it's hard to navigate, really. And so when we're talking about labels, this is obviously going to lead into this next thing that I want to bring out, because our topic here again is a sensitive nature. We're going to be delving into this idea of gender ideology and transgender, and maybe if we get time and have time, gender dysmorphia, and so these are all things that are in a very real way social media just not sharing these ideas. It's literally forming folks' identity, and so we slap those labels on them. We have these huge swaths of people who now they've been categorized as, pick your label on it, and then the battle lines are drawn. It's kind of like us against them, and all of this gets exacerbated when we talk about social media. I've been probably over the last year. I've been doing not quite a year, working on another book and delving deep into social media and the stories of how algorithms actually work and everything that you look up online and all of the stuff that you're seeing, and it's very nefarious, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize is taking place, that it is trying to trigger you. And so this creates an emotional state for somebody looking at things that maybe from an ideological standpoint they don't agree with. And so the social media is just pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's creating more of a divide, more of a wedge. And that's very relevant to us as Christians as we sit back. If we begin to realize what social media is actually doing, it's painting us into a corner as Christians where anybody that has a different lifestyle than we do, especially ones that are on those fringes, and obviously transgender folks would be a very marginalized group of people, although statistically the percentage of those that group is growing. Again, I think it's very related to social media, why that growth is occurring, one of many reasons. But we need to be careful about how we look at that from that standpoint, because we are purposely being divided into these categories, and it makes it hard for us as Christians to respond in an appropriate, loving, kind manner. So where we're seeking to understand where a person is coming from rather than saying, you're a sicko. And that's such, and I use that word as strong language because that's kind of where we're at, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this maybe even on the show of social media creating. It's a sense of community. It's another place of community. It's a much bigger community, right?
Yep.
Because now you can engage and interact with people that are halfway across the country or the world. But I think that there's a lot of danger, and I want to focus in on it as us as Christians. Man, I think social media can be, not always, I don't want to make a generalization here, but can be a really big roadblock to us sharing the gospel.
Yeah.
Because what you post on social media, everyone can see it.
Right.
It can be received so easily, your tone and what you're posting. You may not intend it to be one way and it's taken one way.
Right.
And so it's just, this constant, method of broadcasting yourself and your beliefs. And so I think as Christians, we are not careful on what we post there. Yeah. And we, Christians, can identify with the culture wars just as much and provides just as a negative impact as anyone else of being like, oh, well, this is the right way, you're wrong, and contributing to that kind of divide from a culture standpoint. And that's not at all what Jesus commands us to do and how to handle these issues. Jesus was counterculture.
Yeah.
He came in and was very different, but he wasn't broadcasting and approaching things in a hateful manner or a way that negates from the gospel.
And in a lot of ways, as we're talking about this, from a social media standpoint, some of the trappings that it has, going on both directions here. So you've got emotionally affirming taking place, this emotional affirmation that takes place, both for Christians who may be speaking in harsh ways that are coming across as without grace, without love, okay? And they think they're doing the right thing, and they've got other Christians piling on and saying, yes, speak it, that's right, that's, and so they're getting this emotional affirmation that what they're doing is good, and so they continue to do it, not realizing that it's dividing and even creating more disinterest in Christianity from those that are on the fringes and looking in. And then on the other side of this, the spectrum here, you have adolescents who are already just naturally inclined to be confused about who they are and what they want. I mean, it's a time of questioning. And I think everybody, no matter what generation you grew up in, you understand what I'm saying. I mean, you reach this point where you're wondering, boys and girls and all of the stuff, the biological stuff that goes with that. And so you're already in this space where you're confused. Well, if you have a culture now where an adolescent just kind of expresses the idea that maybe, what would it be like if I'm a boy? What would it be like to be a girl? And you've got celebrities and you've got all of this other stuff saying, oh, well, if you're questioning that, then that means that you are transgender. And you know what? That's good. We're going to celebrate that and you run with that. Let's run with that. And I have to push back on that and go, wait a minute. Let's look at all the other factors here that are going on. Is this just normal adolescence? In a lot of ways it is. Those questions do come up. But you have a small percentage of those kids who are coming from really horrific backgrounds. There's trauma. And so instead of dealing with those mental health issues that need to be addressed in a good, safe environment, you have people who don't understand that, and they're pushing something onto these kids via the social media because it's just so pervasive that it's impossible for them to escape that. And that's a really dangerous place to be when we talk about what it means to be a confused adolescent, searching for answers, wanting to have a space where they feel like they belong, that they're part of a community. And one comment, one misstep, all of a sudden they're roped into something that really is not who they intended to be or what they're designed to be. And so as Christians, we need to be very respective of those inherent dangers that are popping up because of social media. So that, I wanted also to talk about then, what is the responsibility as Christians? What's the What's the path forward here? And you and I were talking a little bit before the podcast about like how often do we in our circle come into contact with people who are struggling with gender issues? Not often. I mean, if we're being honest, right? So I've ran through a handful, and probably me more than most, just because of I do some counseling stuff on the side, so I get referred to ones here and there. Um, and I said, when you ask me, what's the answer here? I said relationship, relationship, and so I want you, because I've heard you talk about this before, and I like the way your perspective is on this. Like, why is building relationship important for us as Christians to do for those who, as Christians, we may feel uncomfortable building relationships with?
Yep. Well, I'll kind of go back to my own story of finding Christ. I met Harrison in high school, and I wasn't a Christian. I wasn't a believer. Maybe agnostic at best, atheist. And Harrison and I, we'd known each other for 2-3 years at this point. I was a junior in high school, and we started hanging out, and he'd invite me over to the house, and then next thing I know, you guys are feeding me Zaxby's
Yep.
on a Wednesday night, and we never had, Craig, you and I never had a conversation early on. Harrison and I never had a conversation early on that was in any way like, hey, this lifestyle that you're living is one that's going to separate you from the creator of the universe. That never came out of your mouth. It never came out of Harrison's.
You didn't get my letters?
Didn't get those letters. But it was time and having a relationship, and the way that you guys treated me, and the environment that you set up, and the way that you carried yourself as Christians, it was refreshing, because honestly, a lot of Christians can be hypocritical, and that makes it hard to want to become a part of this community and really understand Jesus, right? Because you have people that are claiming to be reflections of him that aren't. So, it was all relationship based.
Yeah.
And then I started, coming to church, and the rest is history. So you think about any issue, not just, gender ideology, not just sexuality issues, alcoholism, drug use. I mean, you just name it, anything you can think of. It's extremely important for us to have relationships, because it's not effective. It never will be effective for you to be like, hey, this lifestyle you're living is incorrect. And who am I to have any authority or impose judgment on you, because I have sins and struggles of my own, and people know that.
Yeah.
And so I think, genuine relationships speak so much power, being a true reflection of Jesus and carrying and speaking in truth and love. I mean, that's the example that Jesus laid out, and it's important for us as Christians to do that with everybody we come in contact with.
Yeah. There is such a deep longing for people to feel like they are getting affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
It is a bedrock of the essence of humanity that we need to have that affirmation. We need to feel like we belong. We keep hitting on this, the sense of community, and that's part of what this is about. And I want to make it clear that part of the issue, part of the divide, and I'm going to even argue to say the biggest part of this divide is Christians' inability to think through, how do I affirm a person to give them that sense of belonging when they are diametrically opposed to the things that I believe, okay? Which is why I wanted you to tell your experience there about what it looks like to build relationships. Because as Christians, we've got to get to a place where just because we're not, we don't feel that we're equipped to handle these issues that culture is seeming to push further and further into our doorstep. That doesn't mean we get to slam the door. It's the opposite of that. We need to open the door, and we need to recognize, again, go back to the other episode, we've got to recognize people that we have a hard time relating to as not what they look like, not their piercings, not their tattoos, not their hair color, not what, looking beyond that and seeing them as children who have been created in God's own image. And that goes deeper than than what they look like physically, what they believe as far as gender, if they're confused, if they're struggling to figure out sexuality and who they are. Like, there's got to be a place where we are brave enough to step forward and say, you know what, I don't understand. And a lot of times it's just that genuine transparency, talking to a person and saying, help me understand where you're at right now. Yep. Tell me more about your community. Tell me why that community appeals to you. Mm-hmm. Tell me why you would be very hesitant to be part of a Christian community. Yep. And so real dialogue begins to take place. Not that it's easy dialogue, but there's a clear effort that this person is going to understand this Christian, who I thought is just a hateful, finger-pointing, judgmental person, actually wants to get to know me as a person. And that a lot of times that makes all the difference.
Yep. Well, and you have to ask yourself, do I love this person? And I mean, that's what we're commanded to do. It doesn't say love Christians only,
right?
Or love people that agree with your lifestyle or your choices or fall into your political spectrum. I mean, it says love everyone.
Yeah.
And it's very powerful. Love your enemies. Love people that are against you.
Right.
And so, and I think we struggle with that. Like, we might be able to say it at face value, but again, to have a relationship to the point where you can even begin discussing very close, sensitive issues, yep, you have to love that person. The love has to carry through that relationship. And
here's the mistake that we as Christians make on this. We're like, I can't, I mean, you're telling me to love, that's impossible. I can't. How do I make myself feel a way towards somebody that I'm just hardwired not? And I've told people before, it's not a feeling. Love is not a feeling. Love is a verb. It's action. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to what I was saying. You slam that door in your face, in the face of somebody, that's an action. Yep. And as Christians, showing love to people that we don't agree with ideologically means opening that door and allowing them to sit with us where we have an opportunity to build that relationship.
Yep. And another thing that I think we struggle with is we want to impose judgment. We want to force conviction. And I think about Jesus. I mean, talk about people that are diametrically opposed. I mean, he's stepping on some toes. I mean, the Pharisees were like, no.
He was radical.
Yeah. And his approach was completely, he didn't force judgment. We sing a song, he could have called 10,000 angels. I mean, he could have forced conviction, all right.
Yeah.
But he didn't. And the same is for us. I mean, our mission is to be a reflection, to share the love, to plant the seed, but it's not to force the growth or conviction and impose judgment on others.
Yeah, good thought. So as we, closing out this conversation here, talking about the church's call, this truthfulness, this compassionate presence. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we recognize the church isn't called to be the loudest in the room.
Yeah.
In fact, I think when we're the loudest, that can hurt us the most, especially when we think about social media, because we are humans and we're not always the best representation of Christ. But we're not called to be louder, but we're called to be faithful. We're called to provide perspective and insight on how we are all Imago Dei, mm-hmm, right? That identity is a gift from God, and it's not something that's self-created, right? 1 Corinthians 6:19-20, you're not your own, you were bought with a price. 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. What an encouragement. Yeah. I mean, when we become Christians, we are a new creation. Everything that we were before, all the bad, the struggle, the sin, it can be washed away because now we have true freedom. We have power over death and over sin. And now we're redeemed. We're known and we're redeemed by Christ.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking about that scripture now in a different, maybe a different context. where I'm thinking to myself is I have all these labels. Like I'm a dad, and there's a lot of pressure that comes with being a dad. A husband, there's a lot of pressure that comes with being a husband, right? And so, you go through, I'm a brother, I'm a son. So you have all of these labels. Personally, everybody does have all these labels. And it's hard to meet the standards of whatever the world or your inner circle of influence, your environment says those standards need to be. And we all have them, right? These unspoken, as a friend, my expectations for you are do. I may not verbalize that, but I have it. Okay, so all of these things. But then we're given kind of a way to not worry so much about all of the earthly labels and just be children of God, be the new creation in that. And that's a label that I'm proud of, and it's a great community to be in if it's being practiced in the way that Jesus says that he wants his label, his community to be practiced, which we've just been talking about it this whole time, love. Yep. and not promoting lifestyles that are contrary to God's will, but being able to walk beside a person where they feel like they have a place, they have a refuge, they have somebody who truly cares about them. And you may be surprised, those people that live on the fringes, they may point some things about you as a Christian that need to be pointed out.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a good reminder, Craig. We are first and foremost, or we're supposed to be as Christians, followers of Christ. Sometimes we forget that label, right? Like I think about being a husband, and there's moments where I forget that label if I'm a follower of Christ and maybe not the best husband I can be. But everything that we do should be surrounded by that, that fact that we're made in the image of God. We're a reflection of Christ. We got to remember that as we're in our communities, as we're at work, we're posting on social media, we're engaging with folks that are around us, that first and foremost, I'm a follower of Christ. Yep. I'm a reflection of him, and I love you. I'm going to love you and walk with you regardless of if we're opposed on beliefs or if we're in alignment on beliefs.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so as we close out, I want to say this too, and this is something that I don't often do. I don't know if I've ever done this before or not, but just throwing this out there to anybody that may be struggling with gender issues or whatever. You have a place. You can call if you want somebody that's going to sit with you and talk with you. You call Central Church of Christ here at 400 Vine Street. I'm not going to put that number out. Just you can look it up. It's available. And schedule a time, come and I would be happy to sit down and talk with you, walk beside you on this, any type of struggling issues that you might have. There is a place here that you will not be judged. You will be embraced. And I would love the opportunity to understand where you're coming from, and then also would be delighted to share with you that as a Christian, I care deeply for you. I care where your eternal home is going to be, and I hope that heaven is crowded. I really do. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Line, the Way, and the War. Just want to do a shout out to some of our sponsors. Brandon, who are our sponsors?
So we have Central Church of Christ.
Yay,
of course,
Central.
This is our sponsor. We have Ministry League. And if you like this episode, or if you felt encouraged by it or challenged by it, or you want to see more episodes like it, we encourage you to check us out on all major platforms. We're on Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, you name it. And we also want to plug our other podcast, Digging Deeper, which is a 15-minute snippet of our Sunday service here, which is great. You can get the whole thing in 15 minutes. Sometimes our preacher is a little long-winded, so it's a good way to it's a good podcast, so we encourage you to check it out.
Yep. Okay. Join in next week. We're going to dive in a little bit more. I think we're going to go back to just some questions for each other, because that episode went pretty well. So until our next podcast of The Line, the Way, and the War, be kind to one another, love one another, a verb, and remember that the Creator of the universe loves you so much that he gave his only Son for you. Have a blessed day.